just learned how to get the context of the passage by asking the question, what does Jesus say? Now we're going to begin to interpret the message of what does Jesus mean? The purpose of this section is to understand and then summarize what Jesus means. Jesus' audience understood his message within their own time. But the truth of what Jesus means is still true today. At the end of this exercise, we will write a summarizing statement that I call the big truth. In order to get there, there's two things that we need to do. First is we need to ask, what does Jesus mean then versus now? We also need to ask, what does Jesus mean now that was also true then? When we put these together, we will have a clear understanding of what is the big truth. For each of these sections, I'll give you one example from my own study and explain how I got there. So for the first section, what does Jesus mean then versus now? So first, we want to compare our findings from the previous section where we got the context. And we want to compare that context with the context we are living in today. Next, we want to consider how Jesus' audience received his message then. And finally, we want to understand and ask, how does this begin to affect our perspective on what Jesus said? So for example, when I compare the context that we discovered in the first section with the context we are living today, this is what I begin to understand. I found out that a Pharisee is a ruler of the Jews and a teacher of Israel. And in my American context, I don't have anything similar to the role of a Pharisee. When I look at the governing bodies above us, there's no religious leaders above them. Our government is not structured around a religious rule. That's the role of the Pharisee, a teacher of Israel, a ruler of the Jews. We don't have anything similar to that in our context in America. And so when I begin to try to understand what does Jesus mean in all the things that he says in John 3 surrounding John 3:16, I need to take that into consideration. So let's move on to the second big item here, the second big question. What does Jesus mean now that was also true then? We need to do three things in this. We need to ask what is similar about the context of then and now. We also need to look at how is people's sinful nature the same between then and now. And finally, how is God's desire to redeem people from sin the same between then and now? So I'm going to give you one example again, and we're going to ask ourselves what is similar about the context of then and now. And as I went through this in my study, this is what I began to understand. Like Nicodemus, many people don't understand how to believe in Jesus and receive eternal life, to be free from the condemnation we often feel. So Nicodemus comes to Jesus at night in private, leading me to think he may have been embarrassed or even afraid to ask these kinds of spiritual questions in public. How similar is this to the context we live in today? I mean, I have so many spiritual conversations, the majority of which are more private conversations. They're more intimate. That is so similar. We can relate so much to Nicodemus in this moment. Now at this point, we need to pause and slow down and begin to consider the topic at hand. For this course, the example is salvation, looking at John 3:16. And when we do that, we're going to begin to understand what is the big truth. We're going to begin to see how all these pieces start to come together, from what does Jesus say in the context to what does Jesus mean as we begin to look at the similarities and differences. In order to understand what is the big truth in our topic of discussion, we need to consider who God is, specifically his attributes, his triune nature, and his relationship with man and our relationship with him. This is going to help us summarize the big truth into this beautiful statement. Now, if you don't have a copy of the book, that's okay. But if you do, you'll be able to see that in the appendix, we have a resource about who is the Christian God. And this will help you consider those things, his triune nature, his attributes, and his relationship with man. Now, this is the example that I wrote as I went through this study on my own. The big truth is that there are two types of people. One has believed in Jesus as the Son of God and received eternal life and is walking in the light of God. The other are people who do not desire to walk in the light of God and are experiencing condemnation because they have not believed in Jesus as the Son of God. Now, at this point in your study, it's natural to begin to feel and want to ask the question, so what do we do? Well, that's what we're going to do next. The next section of this course is to understand how to apply this big truth to our life. And we'll do that by asking the question, what does Jesus say to do? But before we do that, you can take a few moments with yourself or with your group to work through for yourself, unpacking what does Jesus mean, and try to come up with your own big truth statement.